Good morning everyone and welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I'm Councillor Amanda Hopgood, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us to follow. Could you please switch off or make silent your mobile phones? Keep microphones switched off at all times unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. And when invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you. And the first time you speak, if you could introduce yourself. So with that, we'll move on to the agenda. Item 1 is public questions. I don't believe we've received any questions for this part of the meeting. So we'll move on to item 2, which is the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of October. Can I please have a mover and seconder for the minutes?
Move, Chairman.
Councillor Shuttleworth, and a seconder, please. A seconder?
I'll second that, Chair.
Thanks. Thank you. I can confirm, therefore, the minutes have been agreed. Item 3, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations from members this morning? No. Right, if we move on to item 4, which is the council tax base 2023-24 and forecast surplus deficit on collection fund. We can ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Paul Darby, the Corporate Director of Resources. This report's an important element of our budget and council tax setting process, not only for the council, but also for our two principal precepting authorities, police and fire, and the local precepting authorities, the town and parish councils, and the Charter Trust for Durham City. In October each year, along with all other billing authorities, we submit to government a return called the Council Tax Base Return. And this is used by the government in the local government finance settlement formula and is the basis for setting the council tax base for budgeting purposes for the following year. The tax base is impacted by not only the number and mix of domestic properties in the county, but also who occupies them and what discounts and exemptions they're entitled to. The tax base is set based on the number of Band D equivalent properties we have across the county. In setting the council tax base, we need to make prudent assumptions in terms of new house building and changes in discounts and exemptions over the coming 18 months. The decision taken by Council on the 19th of October to retain the existing local council tax support scheme next year is a material factor impacting on our tax base setting and forecasting. There are no other policy changes to discounts or exemptions impacting on our tax base considerations for next year, with the Council having already largely maximised any flexibility we have in terms of discounts and exemptions, particularly those applied to empty properties. In setting the tax base for next year, we have again made a prudent assumption of an increase of 250 Band D equivalent properties from April of next year, and we retained a 1% provision for non-payment as part of the tax base setting process, reflecting the overall recovery rate of council tax over time and not to be confused with the in-year recovery rates we achieve. There are currently 252,000 domestic properties in County Durham. However, the tax base has been calculated at 145,675.9 Band D equivalent properties, which is an increase of 1,980 or 1.38% on the tax base for the current year. Members will be familiar with the challenges we face in terms of our tax raising capacity because of our low tax base, with 83.2% of properties in County Durham being in bands A to C and nearly 57% of all properties being in band A. The tax base will allow the council to include an additional £3.4 million of council tax revenues into our budget planning for next year. And in setting the tax base, we must also consider the estimated surplus or deficit on the council tax collection fund at the end of the financial year. And we're required to forecast this and declare what we estimate it to be by mid-January. This report provides an updated forecast on the collection fund position to the 31st of March, based on the position at Q2 at the end of September, and we're forecasting an in-year surplus. But when we take into account the cumulative deficit brought forward, we still have a deficit carried forward on the council tax collection fund of £2.378 million, of which the council's share would be just over £2 million. We're not proposing to formally declare the deficit as part of this report, but await the Q3 forecast updated position at the 31st of December and then declare the formal position in January as part of a planned MTFP update report to the Cabinet. Colleagues at the Police and Fire Authorities have been informed of the tax-based figures contained in this report and the provisional position in terms of the deficit on the collection fund to assist them in their MTFP and budget planning. We've also written to all town and parish councils to inform them of the tax basis and to set out the timetable by which we'd need them to submit their precepts to us to be able to factor those into the Council Tax Setting Report in February. Members will see that in line with the Council Tax Reduction Scheme report agreed by Council last month, we're still proposing to pay £1.5 million of Council Tax Reduction Scheme grant to towns and parish councils next year, using the formula we agreed with the Local Councils Forum a number of years ago, updated for changes in tax raising capacity. The individual allocations and the impact on tax raising capacity for each town and parish council across the county is set out in Appendix 4. Chair, the recommendations are set out in paragraph 9.
Thanks, Paul. I can invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to move the report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the Director of Resources and his team for this important report, which is a component of our annual budget setting process. Calculating and forecasting our tax base is complicated and requires officers to make prudent assumptions about what will happen over the next 18 months, both in terms of the number and types of property mix across the county to be built, but also on who will occupy those properties. It's pleasing to note that the council tax base we will use to calculate our council tax next year shows an increase of 1.38% on the figure we used to set the budget this year, reflecting both continued growth in terms of new house building, but also changes in the incidence of discounts and exemptions across the period. I've spoken many times and lobbied government about how this council suffers from a low tax base and therefore has limited council tax raising capacity compared with many other areas, and the report today once again illustrates that point. Members will see that 83.2% of all domestic properties across County Durham are in bands A to C, which is well above the national average of 65.4%. And this places us at a disadvantage compared with other authorities with high proportions of properties in the council tax bands, higher bands in terms of our tax raising capacity. And put simply, we just cannot generate sufficient income from increases in our council tax on an annual basis to meet our basic unavoidable inflationary pressures, let alone meet escalating demand or invest in improvements. As the Corporate Director has noted, the collection fund forecasts in this report will be updated at Q3, and we will declare the position at that point and in advance of the deadline of 15th of January. The police and fire authorities have been notified of the updated forecast position set out in this report. The report proposes the continuation of grant payments to town and parish councils totalling £1.5 million next year, reflecting the indicative sums the council receives through its formula grant allocations for LCTRS grant for town and parish councils. This is not a statutory requirement, and most of the councils do not make these payments, and while I'm sure colleagues in town and parish councils will appreciate this continued concession, it is something that we will need to seriously review as we move forward, given the council's financial situation. The individual town and parish tax bases and the overall position is set out in some detail in the appendices. And with that, Chair, I'm happy to move the report and the recommendations as set out in paragraph 9.
Thanks, Richard. Can I add my thanks to those of Councillor Bell, to Paul and his team for this report. The report is quite technical, but its contents are an important element of our budget setting process. It is pleasing to note that we are able to agree a tax base with some modest growth next year, though as Councillor Bell has identified, our council tax raising capacity is inhibited by our low tax base. The collection fund forecasts contained in this report are in line with the Q2 forecast of outturn, which we will consider later on this agenda. And whilst I'm sure our colleagues in the police and fire will welcome notifications of these initial estimates to aid their budget planning, I support the proposal to defer declaring the final position for budget setting purposes until January, to allow officers to consider the Q3 position on the collection fund. Whilst we are not obliged to do so, and indeed the majority of other councils do not, I support the continuation of the grant payments to town and parish councils into next year as outlined in the report. With that, I am happy to second this report and ask Cabinet to agree the recommendations set out at paragraph 9. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Okay, can we therefore agree the report and its recommendations? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Move on to item 5, forecast of revenue and capital outturn 2022-23, period to the 30th of September 2022, and update on progress towards achieving MTFP 12 savings. If I can ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. I think the length of the report reflects the length of the title of the report. But what the report seeks to do is to present Cabinet with the Q2 revenue and capital forecast of outturn for the current year based on the position at the 30th of September. It's the second in-year budgetary control report that the Cabinet have received, building on the initial Q1 forecast that was presented in September. And the report also includes details of updated forecasts in terms of our reserves and balances that will be held at the end of this financial year. Since the Q1 report was prepared and subsequently considered by Cabinet in September, a number of material issues have needed to be accommodated in the updated forecasts, and these include several changes to the bank interest rates and escalating inflationary pressures, with CPI being over 10% by the end of Q2, the withdrawal of the health and social care levy, national insurance increases from November, and more significantly, the introduction of the energy rebate scheme, which has capped energy prices in the last 6 months of this year, and equally significantly, some continued increased demographic pressures in our looked after children placement budgets, and further pressures that have emerged in our home to school transport budgets following the re-procurement of these contracts in July and August, and the completion of a number of EHCP plans linked to SEND pupils. There has been some significant change to the forecasts on the back of these issues, but the additional budget pressures that we have faced have broadly been offset by the reduction in our energy bill forecasts and savings from additional interest on our cash balances and savings in our corporate contingencies and capital financing budgets. The Q2 report does, however, once again flag the continuing impact of COVID-19 on our leisure income and waste tonnages in particular. In overall terms, before we adjust for sums that have been picked up from the £10 million earmarked reserve we set aside to fund inflationary pressures, but after we apply our contingency budget, service groupings are forecast to overspend by around £25 million. Once we exclude around £12 million of unavoidable inflationary pressures linked to energy, fuel, waste and transport, the service group and net overspend in the cash limit is around £12.9 million next year, which is £8 million higher than what we were forecasting at Q1. Except for adult and health services and resources, all of the service groupings are reporting a net overspend in the year based on the forecast of Q2. The most significant of this, accounting for the majority of the overspend, is in children and young people services, where, as I've mentioned, looked after children costs have escalated, and the outturn now includes an overspend on home to school transport. CRPS are forecast to be around £12.8 million overspent this year. Details of the cash limit forecasts for each service group are set out in sections 58 to 91, giving a more detailed explanation of the over and under spending across each service grouping. At sections 52 and 53 of the report, we set out details of a further £494,000 of costs we have treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded from contingencies, building on the sums we factored into the Q1 forecasts. The forecast cash limit and general reserves position is set out at paragraph 54 in the report, where the cash limit reserves at the 31st of March 23 are forecast to be 8.3 million and the general reserve is forecast to be 21.3 million. The forecasts are marginally lower than the position forecast at Q1. For the general reserve, the balance will still be below the minimum value set out in our reserves policy agreed by County Council in February of this year. Corporate costs are still forecast to be about £100,000 under budget, and we're reporting a £5 million underspend in the central capital financing budgets and a £3.6 million overachievement of investment income from the investment of our surplus cash balances, which now include the investment of the capital receipt from the sale of the Sands building. Appendix 4 contains details of all earmarked reserves and balances. These are split between sums held corporately, grants and sums held on behalf of third parties, and sums held by services for specific purposes. If we exclude our schools, our earmarked reserves, including the cash limit reserves, are forecast to reduce by around £45 million in year to just over £190 million at the 31st of March 23. Paragraphs 97 to 102 of the report provide a summary of this position. In terms of the dedicated schools grant, that position is covered in sections 103 to 116 of the report, and the report provides details of the forecast outturn position against the dedicated schools grant for maintained and academy schools, including our high needs SEND allocations, our school block and our early years DSG block. The updated forecast for our maintained schools show an improved position when compared to Q1. However, our maintained schools are still forecast to have to draw around £12.6 million of their retained balances in year, which is £5 million more than was anticipated when the budgets were set. And this will still mean that many more of our schools will be in a position of struggling to balance their budgets in 23-24, pending announcements on dedicated schools grant allocations for next year. The updated forecast for our high needs DSG expenditure shows a forecast £250,000 overspend in year, which is in contrast to the Q1 forecast when an underspend was initially forecast. The early years DSG forecast remains in line with the Q1 forecast and is expected to be on budget at this stage. The report does include details of the forecasts, the updated forecasts in terms of our capital programme from paragraph 117 onwards, including details of revisions to the programme to reflect reprofiling and slippage to future years, as well as receipt of grant and other adjustments. Members will see that the revised total capital expenditure forecast for the year is £228.5 million and is around £27 million less than what was previously forecast at Q1, with around £61 million of capital expenditure having been incurred by the 30th of September. Details of how the capital programme is to be financed are set out at paragraph 122, and in paragraphs 120 and 121 there are summary details of the adjustments to the capital programme that have been actioned and which will require Cabinet endorsement as part of agreeing the recommendations to this report. Members will see that at paragraphs 123 to 129, if the report were not already long enough, we've included some details of performance against the various prudential indicators agreed by Council when the budget was set. This is the first time we've included them in the forecast of outturn reports, and will continue to include this in all quarterly budgetary control reports going forward, as it's considered to be best practice to do so. In terms of the collection funds, the report includes details of the forecast outturn position for both council tax and business rates collection funds, and these are set out from paragraph 130 onwards. The outturn forecasts are complex and difficult to explain due to the accounting treatment of government support towards the deficits that arose during the pandemic in 2021. But the net position across both funds after receipt of Section 31 grant is included for the County Council at paragraph 151, and this shows a net surplus of £666,000. Finally, Chair, at paragraphs 158 onwards, there's a summary of progress towards achieving the MTFP savings that were factored into the 22-23 budgets of £2.427 million, and it shows that at the 30th of September, 81% of those savings had been delivered. And there's a further update at paragraph 162 onwards in terms of the HR implications from voluntary, compulsory and early retirements in year and since 2011. Chair, the recommendation set out at paragraph 30. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Richard Bell, Deputy Leader and Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Finance, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to commend the officers for a very comprehensive and thorough report, and also thank budget managers across the Council for their continuing efforts to manage our budgets. The unavoidable cost pressures we are experiencing at this time are immense. Inflation and interest rate increases impacting on pay and on the price of everything we buy, together with escalating demand for children's social care and in home-to-school transport in particular, are resulting in significant overspends. Apart from adult and health services and resources, all other services are forecast to be overspent against their cash limit budgets this year, despite any ongoing COVID-related pressures and the inflationary pressures linked to pay and price inflation being treated as outside their cash limits. The net cash limit overspend for all services is now forecast to be nearly £13 million, around £8 million higher than what was forecast at Q1, and largely down to children and young people's services, where the forecast overspend has risen from 4.9 million at Q1 to 12.8 million at Q2, primarily due to increased pressure in our looked after children budget and further forecast overspends on home to school transport. We will need to reflect on this in terms of our next MTFP 13 forecasts. It's safe to say that the scale of the challenge in terms of balancing our looked after children and home to school transport budgets next year has increased on the back of these forecasts. The cash limit overspend in children and young people's services is significant and will need to be met corporately from a combination of corporate underspends elsewhere and from the General Reserve. The £10 million earmarked reserve that we set aside to meet inflationary pressures will be fully utilised and will help offset the impact on the General Reserve, but the updated forecasts show a need to draw on our General Reserve in year by £4.6 million, taking it down below the minimum threshold set out in our reserve strategy, to an estimated balance at year-end of £21.3 million, around £300,000 worse than the position reported at Q1. Overall, excluding schools' balances, our reserves are now forecast to fall by just under £45 million this year, around £3 million more than what was forecast at Q1. There clearly remains significant uncertainty over our financial settlement for government from the next year and into future years, and we await with interest what will be announced in the budget tomorrow. The forecast cash limit, general reserves and earmarked reserves position for the Council, although forecast to reduce to the year-end, still demonstrates our strong financial standing, which I would venture is better than many other councils. In terms of the collection fund surpluses, forecast, it is pleasing to note an in-year surplus is still forecast on the Council Tax Collection Fund, albeit a slight reduction on the previous forecast. The amended capital programme, taking into account reprofiling and new grants and contributions secured since we considered the Q1 report, results in a 22-23 capital programme of circa £228 million this year, a huge programme. I fully support the amendments made to the capital budgets as outlined in the papers, and I welcome the inclusion of our performance against the various prudential indicators agreed by Council in February, which are in line with best practice and will be a feature of these quarterly budgetary control reports going forward. As for our dedicated schools grant position, like the Council, as has been said, our maintained schools are facing unavoidable inflationary pressures that far outstrip the budget assumptions and DSG provision. The updated forecasts once again assume no further support is provided in year to offset, for example, the Teachers' Pay Award and rising energy costs, and shows an increased draw on maintained schools balances in year, up by 5.3 million from the initial budget estimates, but around 5 million better than the Q1 forecast. Disappointingly, but not entirely unexpectedly, as I think was mentioned in September, there is now a forecast overspend in our high needs dedicated school grant funding block of £250,000 compared to Q1, when a modest underspend of £200,000 was forecast. In terms of delivery of MTFP savings this year, it's pleasing to note that halfway through the year we have delivered around 81% of the £2.4 million of savings requirements for the year. In summary, Chair, the report identifies a range of budget pressures outside of our control that are placing huge pressures on the Council budgets and on our maintained schools. Many of these pressures will have a continuing impact into the next financial year, and will need to be accommodated when we set the budgets and consider our council tax proposals for next year in February. It's because of our strong financial resilience that we can meet some of these pressures from our reserves this year and next. But as has been said on many occasions, this is not a sustainable position. It buys us time to make reforms and reduce costs in the council, and without significant additional funding from government, we will need to find savings to offset these overspends in the base budget. This will involve difficult decisions having to be made, and the spade work for these difficult decisions is being done now. The Council will, however, continue to exercise prudent financial management, and we will meet those challenges and take whatever decisions are required. And with that, Chair, I would move the recommendations set out in the report at paragraph 30. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Bell, to Paul and his team for what is once again a very detailed and comprehensive update on our budget performance. I'd also like to thank all budget members across the Council for the management of their budgets in what are difficult circumstances. Accurately forecasting and keeping track of the finances in a Council of the scale and complexity of ours is undoubtedly challenging, but managing our finances is a key issue for us all, particularly at this time when the Council is facing unprecedented demand and volatility in terms of cost pressures and an uncertain outlook in terms of future finance settlements. Our robust financial management of this Council has consistently been recognised in the value for money assessments from our external auditors, and I fully expect that this will once again be the case when they present their report to the Audit Committee later this month. Pay and price inflation, particularly energy, waste and transport-related costs, are continuing to place unprecedented pressures on our budgets, and as these forecasts show. £12 million of COVID and the inflationary pressures have been treated as outside the cash limit and met corporately, funded as Councillor Bell has outlined, from a combination of corporate contingencies and the earmarked reserve we set aside as part of closing the accounts in anticipation of this position. Many of the inflationary and demand pressures in this report will continue into next year, and together with the uncertainty over our financial settlement from government for next year, we are in a very difficult place in terms of our budget planning for 2023-24 and our MTFP position going forward. We will need to carefully reflect on those updated forecasts in terms of the impact it will have on the 2023-24 budget and on the MTFP position we considered at Cabinet on the 12th of October, when the updated position is considered by Cabinet in January. With that, I am happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report at paragraph 30, including the amendments to the capital programme as outlined in the report. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report, please? Okay. Can we agree the report and its recommendations, please? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Excuse me. Item 6, Growing Up in County Durham, Strategy 2023 to 25. Can I ask John Pearce, Corporate Director of Children and Young People Services, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. John Pearce, Corporate Director, Children and Young People Services. So I'm really pleased to present the new Growing Up in County Durham strategy for endorsement by Cabinet. The strategy covers the period 2023 to 2025. It's based on a very clear evidence base about the needs of children and young people across the county, and all of the background information is available on the Durham Insight website. This evidence base led us to the 4 aims to better manage outcomes that are described in paragraph 13D of the report. The strategy was also developed in conjunction with children, young people and their families, as well as a range of partners and community groups who deliver children's services. It captures the things that children and young people told us were important to them, and paragraph 18 highlights 6 priority areas that have been identified by children and young people that we will focus on as part of the implementation of the strategy. It also covers a wider context that impacts on the lives of children and young people, including the consequences of the pandemic, their physical and mental health and well-being. It tries not to duplicate with other major strategies, and therefore signposts to those strategies where common themes and issues are identified. So it's not trying to be all-encompassing, it is trying to look at where we can add value to the lives of children and young people across the county, whilst connecting into the range of strategies that already exist. A very detailed consultation process over 3 stages has taken place during this year, and details of the consultation process are described in paragraph 15 of the report. It's proposed, if the strategy is endorsed by Cabinet and partner organisations, that we plan to launch it in 2023, and it will be supported by a full implementation plan, as well as a range of communications to make sure that we get the objectives of the strategy out there. The full strategy is included in Appendix 2, We think it's a very accessible document. It's been designed and developed with children and young people, and the recommendation to Cabinet to endorse the report is to endorse the strategy is set out in paragraph 12 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, John. Can I invite Councillor Ted Henderson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People's Services, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Ted Henderson, the Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People's Services. I know that we have listened to the views of children and young people, and that they have guided the development of the Growing Up in the County strategy. Alongside this work, comprehensive consultations processes have included a wide range of stakeholders, including DCC, the key partners, and the voluntary and community sector, and most importantly, children, young people, and their families. The strategy has been written in a way that is easy for a young person to understand without technical information. It focuses on adding to the excellent work that is already being done across the county. It doesn't duplicate what already exists in other strategies, but it does provide helpful links to information about the work being done. It is also based on the evidence which has informed the high-level actions, including the development of a network of family hubs to deliver locally based services and exploring the benefits available to young people who use public transport. I am confident that the strategy includes the right actions to improve the lives of children, young people, and their families across the county. Excuse me. I fully support the vision of the Growing Up in County Durham strategy. That County Durham supports all children, young people and their families to achieve their goals in life in an environment that is safe, happy and healthy. I look forward to supporting the work being undertaken, though a more detailed action plan to achieve real and improved outcomes for our children and young people. I move the recommendation set out in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Ted. Can I invite Councillor John Shuttleworth, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Rural Communities and Highways, to second the report, please?
Thanks, Chair. During the consultation process for the Growing Up in County Durham strategy, a lot of children and young people told us that following the lockdowns during the COVID pandemic, they recognise the importance of being able to go out into their communities to access services. They talk about how important it is to be able to socialise face-to-face with friends, be able to go to leisure facilities or take part in physical activities and access good quality learning and skills opportunities. As portfolio holder for Rural Communities and Highways, I realise that living in a rural community in County Durham at a time which is hard financially for many families can make it difficult for families and young people to access the services they want or need. I'm really pleased to see that addressing public transport issues has been recognised and included in the new strategy, especially in relation to concessionary fares for children and young people. And on that basis, I'd like to second the recommendations in the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Is there anyone else wishing to speak on the report? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations, please? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendation is agreed. Item 7, Poverty Strategy and Action Plan. Can I ask Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report presents Cabinet with the finalised Poverty Strategy and Action Plan, as updated following an extensive consultation engagement exercise on the draft Strategy and Action Plan, which was considered by Cabinet in April. The finalised Poverty Strategy and Action Plan is attached at Appendix 2, and attached at Appendix 3 is the updated Child Poverty Action Plan, both of which are linked and overseen by the Council's Poverty Action Steering Group. The initial draft plans that were developed through a series of workshops, bringing together officers from across the Council, along with some conversations and engagement of key stakeholders such as the CAB and the Advice in County Durham Partnership Board. There has been an extensive consultation on the plans over the last 6 months. Paragraph 65 sets out the groups that were engaged with nearly 500 individuals participating in these discussions and a number of people choosing to complete the online survey and submit comments via email too. As part of the consultation, we asked 3 questions. Were the draft objectives the right ones to focus on? Were there any gaps in what we were planning to do or what we currently provided, and what more could we do? And were there any groups of people that were not being catered for in the plan? The consultation feedback is summarised in the report from paragraphs 69 to 94. The mission statement for the Poverty Strategy and Action Plan and the underpinning strategic objectives that were presented to the Cabinet in April, on which all of the actions are hung, are set out at paragraph 53 and 54 and remain unaltered. But the actions included in the plan have been updated for the feedback we've received. The Child Poverty Plan and Action Plan vision and underpinning strategic objectives are set out at paragraph 59 and 60 to the report. The report includes a summary of the support mechanisms currently in place within the Council, and the updated Poverty Strategy and Action Plan not only seeks to focus on maintaining that support and ensuring there's an effective safety net of crisis support available, but also that the plan focus on routes out of poverty through better employment opportunities and the links to the digital inclusion and better training and transport access. It also seeks to make links with and help tackle issues such as debt management, access to advice, impacts of mental health and affordable housing. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 15 and include a commitment for the Cabinet to receive an annual report on progress made against the actions contained in the plans. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Alan Shield, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Equality and Inclusion, to move the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank Paul and his team, and in particular Mary Redman, our Head of Transactional and Customer Services, for their dedication and hard work over the last 6 months to undertake what has been an extensive consultation and engagement programme, building on their excellent relationships with our partners in County Durham, which have been developed over many years. I'd also like to acknowledge the work of the Poverty Action Steering Group, the Child Poverty Working Group and the Advice in County Durham Partnership, as well as many other of our partners and stakeholders in helping to shape and finalise the Poverty Strategy and Action Plan attached to this report. As I said previously, in moving the draft Poverty Strategy and Action Plan back in April, poverty is a complex issue. Its impacts are devastating. It has a profound impact on so many people, far too many, manifesting itself in many ways. Its impacts are complex, as are its causes. What is clear, though, that is it blights and holds back many of our communities right across the county. Tackling such a complex problem, however, requires a multifaceted approach, recognising that the Council alone cannot address its causes and impacts. That said, our response is comprehensive. We also have a strong safety net in place in County Durham to address those most vulnerable and disadvantaged residents in our society, and the various schemes in place are outlined in the report. To truly tackle this complex issue, however, requires a joined-up approach to ensure people in crisis are provided with the advice, guidance and financial assistance they need to provide a sustained route out of poverty. Ultimately, the route out of poverty lies in access to more and better jobs, which is why the economic strategy that will be presented to Cabinet next month and the provision of better education, skills and training opportunities are so important, alongside digital connectivity plus a well-connected transport infrastructure. In everything we do, we should continually seek to raise aspirations and provide opportunities for all working collectively with our partners and stakeholders. To achieve this, we simply cannot do it alone, nor should we assume that we could do it alone as well. Following a consultation, the mission statement, which is to work together so few people will be affected by poverty and deprivation, remains unaltered, as does the 4 strategic objectives under which the various actions that we will take forward are: to use intelligence and accurate data gathering to target support to low-income households, to strive to reduce the financial pressures on people who are in poverty, to promote social inclusion and increase individual, household and community resilience to poverty, to reduce barriers, thereby allowing residents to access services for those experiencing financial insecurity. We have, however, carefully reflected on the consultation feedback, consultation that was taken at a time of soaring inflation and a squeeze on household incomes. There is a summary of the responses to the consultation questions we posed in the report. We have listened and carefully reflected on this feedback in finalising the strategy and action plan. Our action plan has been updated and does contain actions to support those facing immediate financial hardship, alongside medium to long-term strategies to provide opportunities for a route out of poverty. The poverty strategy and action plan provides the basis for the work of the Poverty Action Steering Group, the Child Poverty Working Group, the Advice and County Durham Partnership, and our key stakeholders such as Citizen Advice, County Durham, Durham Christian Partnership, including the food banks, and East Durham Trust, to ensure our residents, particularly those in crisis, continue to receive the support they need currently. With that, Chair, I move that the Cabinet agree the recommendations which are set out in paragraph 14. Thank you.
Thanks, Alan. If I can invite Councillor Ted Henderson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People, to second the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I also thank Paul and his team for this report that they've brought forward today. It is pleasing to see the work of the Child Poverty Working Group and the Child Poverty Action Plan is recognised. I know we have strong partnership working on this important agenda, and the tackling child poverty and its impact is a key priority within the wider poverty strategy and the action plan. The consultation on the poverty strategy and action plan has provided an opportunity to refresh and update the child poverty action plan and integrate this into the consultation exercise that has been going on. The updated Child Poverty Action Plan is appended to this report, and I am happy that these 2 action plans complement each other and are fully integrated. With that, Chair, I second the recommendation set out at paragraph 14.
Thanks, Ted. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report, please? Yep, Councillor MacDonald.
Councillor MacDonald, Cabinet Member for Digital Customer Services and Procurement. Thanks, Chair. I'd also like to add my thanks to Paul and his team, and again particularly Mary Redman and all the officers involved in our Poverty Action Steering Group in helping to shape and deliver on actions contained in these plans. I would also like to pay tribute to Councillor Alan Shield for leading on this agenda, something I know which is dear to his heart. The underlying causes and impacts of poverty are complex and can sometimes be intergenerational, but these impacts are being magnified currently by the cost of living crisis. Whilst the scale of the challenges we face is significant and has only increased over the last year, the scale of our response has also been significant. And the arrangements we have in place in County Durham is the envy of many other areas. We can be proud of the various schemes we have in place in terms of our local tax reduction scheme and the council tax hardship support scheme, debt, benefit and other advice provision, the food and energy support we provide, the investment in local support schemes via our AAPs, the support available to those in crisis through our welfare assistance scheme, discretionary housing payments, and through various initiatives such as the Holiday Activities Fund and Food Programme, the ongoing development and rollout of the Bread and Butter theme, which provides cost-effective distribution of surplus food across the county, and through our new Warm Spaces initiative. These schemes have helped and continue to help thousands and thousands of the most disadvantaged and financially vulnerable households right across the county, and we will continue to provide that safety net and build on that crisis support through the actions contained in this plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Susan. Does anyone else wish to speak? Okay, can we therefore agree the report and its recommendations? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. So we'll move on to item 8, which is the County Durham Local Development Scheme and Publication Draft Minerals and Waste Policies and Allocations document. Almost a title as long as Paul Darby's titles of his reports. Can I ask Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present a report, please?
Thank you, Councillor Hopgood, and good morning, everybody. Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth. The purpose of this report is to seek Cabinet's approval to commence the consultation on the draft Minerals and Waste Policies and Allocation Plan document, and it also seeks the approval of a new local development scheme which sets out the timetable for the preparation of planning documents, including the Minerals and Waste Development Plan document. The Minerals and Waste Development Plan document supports the adopted County Durham Plan and expands on its content by introducing additional policies and allocations. And the document has been prepared in line with the latest national guidance, but will be updated if necessary to reflect any changes to central government guidance. As background, the Development Plan document has been informed by consultation undertaken on a draft plan from September to November 2021. All comments made as part of this consultation have been fully considered in developing this draft of the DPD document. The statement of consultation and site assessments documents are respectively set out in Appendix 4 and Appendix 5 of this report. Some examples of the key issues raised which have been responded to in the form of changes to the draft include the need to strengthen policy MW1 to protect our environment and address climate change, a new paragraph in policy MW22 to address the long-term protection of groundwater and other water resources raised by the Environment Agency, and comments from 2 mineral operators resulted in the inclusion of 2 allocations for inert waste disposal. As part of the development plan, the assessment was subject to a sustainability appraisal, which is a statutory process integrated into the preparation of all aspects of the document. The process assesses the potential impacts of policies and allocations against a range of economic, social and environmental considerations which help to shape this document. Alongside the policies of the adopted County Durham Plan, the Development Plan document will contribute to meeting our strategic objectives of the County Durham Plan. The draft plan therefore supports an approach to providing a steady and adequate supply of minerals in accordance with the principles of sustainable development. And furthermore, the draft plan provides policies to support the development of a network of modern waste management facilities which will help to ensure that the waste arisings are managed in accordance with the principles of the waste hierarchy, which seeks to present waste and reuse and recycle and recover anything that is produced. The minerals worked from the county's Durham's many quarries can contribute to the local economy, including through employment, and as an essential raw material. Without many of the minerals worked today from the county's quarries, the construction industry would not be able to build and maintain the roads, homes, workplaces and other infrastructure required. The County Durham network of waste and management facilities, which includes household waste recycling facilities and a number of large landfill sites, manages waste generated both from within and outside of County Durham. The Minerals and Waste Policies and Allocation document contains specific policies for a number of economically important minerals that are not addressed in the minerals policies of the County Durham Plan, detailed minerals and waste development plan management policies covering, for example, relating to the process and storage of the transport of minerals and waste. It also includes 2 non-strategic minerals allocations for an extension to Crimerig Quarry and the deepening of Thrislington West Quarry, as well as 2 non-strategic allocations for waste disposal at Crimerig Quarry and Cold Knuckles Quarry. If agreed, the consultation will be undertaken from November the 28th, 2022 to the 13th of January 2023. The consultation will be undertaken in accordance with the Council's Statement of Community Involvement. Once this final round of consultation is complete, the document will need to be agreed by the Cabinet and full Council for submission to the Planning Inspectorate for an examination in public by an independent inspector. And finally, the Local Development Scheme sets out for approval the new Local Development Scheme, the LDS, which is the timetable for the preparation of a number of planning documents, including the document before you today. And attached is Appendix 2 of this report. Cabinet is recommended to agree the Local Development Scheme and the publication of the Draft Minerals, Waste Policies and Allocations Development Plan document and supporting documents for consultation from the 28th of November 2022 to the 13th of January 2023, as set out in Section 7 of this report. Chair, that concludes my presentation of this report.
Thanks, Amy. If I can invite Councillor Elizabeth Scott, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Economic Regeneration and Growth, to move the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. Members will recall that the County Durham Plan was adopted in October 2020. However, that was not the end of the story, and the Local Development Scheme sets out how we'll bring forward a number of documents over the next few years which will support its content. These documents, including the Minerals and Waste Policies and Allocations Development Plan document being considered today, will give additional detail and clarity on what is required for new development to be acceptable, providing certainty for developers and reassurance for residents. As a council, we always emphasise the importance of consultation, and we will therefore be seeking views on this document to inform its final content before it is submitted for an examination in public. Both the Minerals and Waste DPD and the Local Development Scheme are important documents as they provide certainty to the community and investors on how we will determine planning applications for minerals and waste development and when we will be preparing supporting documents for the county plan. I therefore propose the recommendations in paragraph 7 of the report.
Thanks, Elizabeth. If I can invite Councillor James Rowlandson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Resources, Investments and Assets, to second the report, please.
Thank you, Chair. The Minerals and Waste Development Plan document is important for the county's economy as it will ensure we are planning for mineral extraction, waste management in order to provide the infrastructure, buildings, energy and goods the county needs. I therefore second the proposal to agree the recommendations of paragraph 7 of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to this report? Okay, can we agree the report and its recommendations, please? Okay, I can confirm that the recommendations are agreed. Moves us on to item 9, which is Finance Durham, the first 5 years. Can I ask Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Amy Harhoff, Corporate Director of Regeneration, Economy and Growth. I'm really pleased to bring forward this report to Cabinet today, which sets out a number of the benefits of our Finance Durham's Fund, which we've been delivering over the last 5 years. And the purpose of this report is just to set out an update to Cabinet. By way of background, and included in paragraphs 15 to 24 of your report, the report sets out the purpose of the Finance Durham Fund, which was to support the Council's vision for a County Durham 2019 to 2035, and particularly our ambition to create more and better jobs by investing in county-based businesses to aid business growth, as well as attracting businesses to locate in the county and create jobs. Finance Durham was set out as an evergreen fund, meaning that returns on investment through loan repayments, interest and capital growth through equity investments would be reinvested to then support further businesses to grow. Maven Capital Partners UK LLP was appointed by the Council to manage the fund in 2017 and it is FCA regulated. Its role is to make investment decisions that balance generating a financial return whilst creating significant economic impact. For example, by investing in sectors which have a high growth potential in line with the Council strategy for an inclusive economy. Paragraphs 25 to 38 describe performance, and particularly worth mentioning are the following. In the first 5 years of the fund, a total of 10.2 million was invested in 21 companies, and this generated a return of £768,000, which has been reinvesting following the evergreen principles of the fund that I've previously referred to. But the investment has also helped lever in a further 32.3 million of private sector investment, supporting the creation of over 200 new jobs and the protection of over 700 further jobs in the county. Almost half of the investment has been in high-tech businesses, and over a third has been in our manufacturing base, which is a key strength of the county's economy. This performance came in a period that saw two profound economic shocks, Brexit and the COVID pandemic. The impact of these had on the timing of investments is set out in the report and makes the fund performance even more credible against this backdrop. A re-procurement exercise for the fund manager to deliver the fund for the next 5 years has recently been completed, and this was won by Maven Capital, reflecting a strong performance in the first 5 years. The second 5-year term for the fund has started, and it started well. There is an investment plus a strong pipeline totalling 2.7 million, and in addition, the first realisation of an equity investment has taken place through the sale of Intelligence Fusion, which is now set for further growth in Durham City, and has generated a return of 1 million to the fund on top of the original amounts invested. Set against this is the unfortunate failure of two investments totalling 582,000, and this represents 5.7% of the total invested through the fund. It should be remembered, however, that all investment funding carries some risk. However, there is a strong performance, and the initial modelling for the fund suggested a failure rate of 45%, so overall performing well. The report concludes that Finance Durham has been a success, playing an important role in developing the county's economy by investing in sectors and technologies that are at the forefront of change or add to Durham's capabilities to lever investment. It's also an important tool as part of a wider suite of tools that we have to support businesses, including signposting, business support for wider investment, and is important to both inward investment and existing investment in the county. Chair, this report is to note, and the recommendations are set out in paragraph 14.
Thanks, Amy. Can I invite Councillor James Rawlinson, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Resources, Investments and Assets, to speak to the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. The Council's vision for County Durham 2019 to 2035 includes the ambition to create more and better jobs. I'm convinced that the Finance Durham is playing a key role in realising this vision. The fund has aligned well with other DCC initiatives delivered by Business Durham. For example, the County Durham Growth Fund scheme, which provides grants for businesses investing in productive assets, and the new factory units at Jade Business Park. The companies invested in are a reflection of the direction our economy needs to take. For example, Powerroll, which is developing low-cost printable solar technology, and the fund is an important part of the package we can offer as a county to attract businesses to locate here, as well as to support growth of our established manufacturing base and growing high technology sectors. I formally move the recommendations set out in paragraph 14. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, James. The recommendation is for Cabinet to note the report, therefore we don't require a seconder. However, is there anyone else wishing to speak? No, can we therefore agree to note the report? Okay, I can confirm the report is noted. Moves us on to item 10, the County Durham Partnership Update. Can I ask Alan Patrickson, Corporate Director of Neighbourhoods and Climate Change, to present the report, please?
Thank you, Chair. This report is the regular roundup of activities of the County Durham Partnership. It's full of information on the work of the partnership boards and our area action partnerships across the county. The County Durham Partnership Board itself is currently preparing for its annual event in November, which this year will focus on the cost of living crisis and it will seek positive responses through the partnership and through our working to that crisis. In preparation, the board has already received representation on the emerging poverty action strategy, which has already been discussed here today. The board has also received updates from thematic leads for environment and climate change, particularly highlighting the new Climate County Durham website, and from the Safe Durham Partnership on the work that's ongoing around Publicly Accessible Locations Pilot, which is a scheme to bring partners together to help keep the public safe from terrorist and criminal attacks in the wake of the Manchester Arena bombing. The Partnership Forum earlier in the year focused on two important areas, the first being the ongoing review of community engagement designed to ensure that the Council's governance and engagement mechanisms and systems remain fit for purpose for the future, and the second being the position relating to the Council's bids under the Levelling Up funding arrangements. The report also notes the launch of the Warm Spaces Network, where the Council and community venues are working together to provide safe and warm spaces over the winter for people who may be finding it difficult to cope with the increasing costs of home heating. The Fun with Food programme has delivered over £1.4 million of activities across the school holidays, providing entertainment, education and play for children alongside a healthy food programme, which is particularly important for those at risk of holiday hunger. Activities have been delivered from council and community venues, and the size and scale of this initiative across the county is a demonstration in itself of the strength of community working across our partnerships. The Safeguarding and other statutory partnership boards continue to deliver on their important agendas of providing assurance, support, challenge and training to maintain and increase the standards of governance and reporting. The Safeguarding Adults Board will also be instrumental in providing events in support of the upcoming National Safeguarding Adults Week in November. The Durham Safeguarding Children's Partnership is reviewing options for a revised learning model for the service improvement and have been refreshing their own website to help improve engagement and accessibility to important tools and information for practitioners. The extensive work going on in the area of humanitarian support is also highlighted in the report, as is the work already mentioned of the Advice and County Durham Partnership to provide joined-up advice and support in the face of the cost of living crisis. The remainder of this report outlines the work of the thematic partnerships and the area action partnerships in support of the County Durham Vision 2035 across the key themes of more and better jobs, people living long and independent lives, and connected communities. In each of these areas, the report highlights work being done at county level, along with some shining examples of the extensive local delivery work facilitated through our AAPs. Too much to cover in detail here as an introduction, but definitely a demonstration of the thriving partnership work across the county. Chair, the recommendation, paragraph 7, is to note the report.
Thanks, Alan. As Chair of the County Durham Partnership, I am, as always, delighted and inspired to see the extent of our partnership working across the county drawn together in this update. The uncertain and for many difficult financial circumstances we find ourselves in, however, casts a shadow across this update. The partnership event that will be held later this month, hosted jointly with Advice in County Durham, will focus entirely on the cost of living crisis and how the partnership and community sectors can respond to the pressures that this brings to our county, supporting individuals and communities through difficult times. The Partnership Board regularly receives updates from the Poverty Action Steering Group, which demonstrate the power of partnership working across this agenda, and the Fun with Food programme, which provides help to those children at risk of holiday hunger. It has delivered a significant number of initiatives across the county at both council and community venues. The report also notes the launch of the Council's Warm Spaces Network, bringing together council and community venues that are able to provide places for people who are worried about energy costs to gather to stay warm, socialise and get access to services and, in some cases, refreshments. This initiative is a true partnership effort where funding provided by the Council is being utilised across our communities to gain a wider benefit than any of us partnership members could deliver individually. These projects together demonstrate how organisations and communities acting together locally can work together to mitigate the impact of the challenges brought on by national and international events, especially for those most in need in our county. Our partnership boards continue to deal effectively with a range of strategic and statutory issues affecting the county, some of which will affect the way public services operate in an uncertain future. The Safeguarding Adults Board will be leading on the partnership support for Safeguarding Adults Week later this month. This is a week dedicated to professional and public awareness of safeguarding issues, comprising of workshops, events and awareness-raising initiatives, focusing this year on issues of self-neglect, abuse and how to build safeguarding into everyday life. The event will also focus on building safer organisational cultures in the professional environment, and a range of training events will be provided. The vital work of the Economic Partnership to develop an inclusive economic strategy continues. Building on the innovative e-conversation consultation process and the Environment and Climate Change Partnership is finding new ways to bring together ecology and climate science to the work of the partnership, focusing recently on the delivery of an electric vehicle charging network to the county. This of course is not an extensive list, but just some highlights of the work underway. The report also provides highlights from the work of our AAPs across the county. Highlights in this report range from an eco-festival to river safety improvements. These are alongside many other supporting employment, education, environment and community support. Finally, I'd like to once again mention the work that our partnerships continue to play in the vital humanitarian support work across the county. The continuing war in Ukraine and other conflicts around the world have displaced people in significant numbers who seek refuge in our country. Our partnerships, communities and residents continue to play our part in providing a place of safety for those fleeing life-threatening situations. This report is full of important and inspiring projects, large and small, and as always I recommend that everyone should read it to see the extent of the work taking place across County Durham. The recommendation is for Cabinet to note the report, therefore we don't require a seconder. However, is there anyone else wishing to speak to the report? Yeah, Councillor Scott.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to echo your positive comments on the extent and nature of the partnership working across our county and the inspiring nature of many of the initiatives that have come out of this, especially those relating to our young people who represent the future of County Durham. For my part, I'd like to highlight just a couple of additional issues that represent the forward-looking agenda of our council. The work of the Economic Partnership on the new inclusive economic strategy is progressing well, with extensive consultation completed, resulting in a real and meaningful input from organisations and individuals across the county. Already we are seeing an exciting and optimistic approach emerging for the future of the county, and as the portfolio holder, I look forward to bringing more on this to Cabinet in the near future. I would also highlight that our review of community engagement is also progressing well, again with extensive consultation and important conversations with partners across the county, providing significant input as to what works well and what doesn't in our current system. This work too is designed from the ground up to be forward-thinking and optimistic, and to provide positive change to our governance and structures, leading to better outcomes for communities. Our community engagement activities need to be fit for purpose in 2023 and beyond, and this is what we are seeking to design. Chair, this report is a thorough and fascinating read, and I echo your remarks that it should be read and communicated widely.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Is there anyone else wishing to speak? Can we note the report? Okay, I can confirm the report is noted. Item 11 is any other business. I haven't been notified of any other business, but before Helen panics, I am going to mention something. And I want to mention that last night some of us attended the Journals Culture Awards at Durham Cathedral, and I want to just let everyone know that County Durham, the Council and the bid team for Durham 2025 were given a special recognition award for the work they did around the City of Culture bid and the ongoing journey that we're still having with regards to culture and County Durham. So I think that really deserves a mention here today, I also mention it in full council. So I'd just like to thank everyone formally who's been involved in that, our partners. And again, that's just a really strong example of how partnership working really does work. So thank you. With that, I'll close the meeting and would like to thank everyone for taking part.